Welcome to Episode 6 of Pitch Black Beacon. And today's topic, we are talking about choosing your words wisely. And we decided to go with this topic because how we talk to ourselves, how we communicate to other people, how we interact with our environment based on the words that we're using can be so empowering and so impactful and what we're trying to achieve. If we're constantly filling our head with negative words, if we're constantly filling our head with positive words, both of those are going to have very different outcomes in like a same situation. Like if you have one situation and you choose to be negative about it versus the same situation you choose to be positive about it, very, very different outcomes. And so I'm excited about this because this was a really big one for me in getting out of that black and white thinking of I'm either positive or I'm negative and working towards that neutrality of being content in what I'm saying, having positive communication about things, but not having to be in that constant, like I'm skipping and it's always butterflies and rainbows and everything's always good. Because I thought when I was so not used to positive language or like positivity in my life, that I felt like in order to be positive, I had to be like constantly hyper, constantly happy, constantly just like doing something and just full of life and living life to the fullest. And that was exhausting and it caused burnout. And then I go right back to the negative because that's not sustainable. And so having that resting point in your life be that neutrality where, maybe instead of having any emotion about a situation or choice words about a situation, you just decide to take a deep breath and be calm before you proceed. And Joshua, that's one thing that I noticed in you, in your self-discipline and how you practice communication and navigate situations, is that you tend to always take a deep breath and approach things, process things, and approach them in an appropriate manner instead of just being reactive to a situation. And for somebody who lived a majority of her life being very reactive to every little thing, it was such a mind boggle to me to see that, because I was like, how the heck do you manage to keep your shit together to be neutral and or possibly even positive? And one of your superpowers is definitely utilizing humor to help turn a situation around. But also appropriate time and place. But even humor has positivity in it. So in this episode, we're definitely going to talk about how those work, like gaining that self-awareness and understanding and becoming better with your words, as well as a little bit of the science behind how it affects you on a physical and mental capacity as well. So
Indeed, I agree. I love it. I think one thing that inspired me as a kid to bring me into a state of awareness for my comedy side was always trying to identify as a comedian because of harsh realities that I lived in. Like the environment that I grew up in wasn't always the best, so I looked to comedians to um, identify as, right? And when they would use their power of words to create laughter, it was a good feeling. And it was, you know, hey, I'm in this terrible place, but this guy still makes me laugh. And, even as a youngster, I was like, man, these words can change things inside of me, right? And that's where that self-awareness for me came from, was growing up in rough neighborhoods and looking towards the funny things in life still. And when you become into that self-awareness, it's easier to take situations, even just crazy situations that most people would freak out in, um, and still be able to connect with something that keeps your mind focused and you know
and staying neutral.
analytical
Staying
and stay
neutral in this
neutral.
situation. Yeah. And I think what you're talking about too, what I'm hearing you say when you talk about always finding something to keep your focus on, right? I I heard in my head, I've heard people say so many times like, "Oh, well, just find the silver lining," right? And I'm not saying that people who go around trying to find the silver lining are wrong, but I feel like when I used to work through that, where I was like, "Oh, well, as long as you find the silver lining, everything's going to be fine." Like, yes, your dog died today and your kid was just in the hospital, but hey, you got that cake you wanted, it's like, well, that doesn't
That's not a very good
right. It's like not, and
line.
and I
I don't
felt
like that line.
Well, I know, and that's what I'm saying is like with silver, like people, like for me, the silver lining mentality still keeps you connected to the negative, right? Like, oh, hey, let's find the silver lining amongst all this negative. Like your focus is still on the negative and you're like digging for this like one little bit of positive. Where when you choose to accept neutrality and positivity in your mental thinking, or I don't even want to use the word positivity because I guess I feel like that creates like the sense of like happiness or, upbeat or whatever. It doesn't, it's more just peace, like neutrality and peace in your
Right.
thinking. And at times that can be positive words or positive emotions like happiness and, and giddiness and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't. So I'm going to say neutrality and peace. When you find like neutrality and peace, you're kind of not choosing to focus on the negative and digging through that for that one little good nugget that you can take away from the day, because then you're holding on to something so tight that's so small when you can change it and have gratitude about the situation instead. Or you can find that, for example, like when my dog died, it was a really, really sad day for me, right? But instead of focusing on the fact that my dog died, taking that and just thinking of all the positive memories and experiences that I had with her and just having all the gratitude about having that and the peace of knowing that there's purpose in this too. And, yes, she's passed, but I know that we could never have found an apartment with that would accept 3 dogs. So this was kind of a blessing in disguise because we were able to find an apartment that accepted 2 dogs, right? And so not always looking for that silver lining where it's just like that negative, like you're keeping your focus on the negative. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that is true. I don't really like that saying either.
Because there's so much gratitude to be had, but I feel like
Right.
people get
Uh,
gaslit into being like, oh, well, just look at the positive,
Yeah,
just look at the positive. And it's like, no, like it's okay that the negative happened, but what I'm going to take away from it is
it's the
this
lesson.
instead.
Like you're like you said, the gratitude. And I think that's like gratitude is the beginning of the love pull, right? You have to be
Mm-hmm.
thankful for what you have in life and what you're going through and the lessons you're learning before you receive total bliss and total love and happiness. And being grateful is the beginning step, I think. And it's one of them, one of the beginning steps because like you said, grieving, if you're stuck in it, creates huge negative emotions, huge negative sicknesses inside yourself. Whereas, like, you can accept the situation that you lost your dog and release that into, well, they're always going to be with me, and the love energy is always going to be there. That connectivity of love with,
Mm-hmm.
but it all
Yeah.
starts with gratitude. You got to be thankful for the time that you had with your dog in order to receive that um, power of love memory. So you take gratitude and you take the gratitude feeling and you start using words like, since we're talking about words, we're gonna use words to change. That's what I like about comedians. Like they can take words and just change them into funny situations and funny feelings and happy feelings, right? They make you
Mm-hmm.
laugh, makes you feel good. Same thing with like gratitude. In order to grieve from the loss of your dog, you have to be like, use words like, man, it was great having her while I did, or the time I got to spend with her was wonderful. These kinds of
Mm-hmm.
words, instead of words like, oh, I'm so hurt that she's gone and it's never going to be the same. See that it's
And
got
I'm gonna miss
different,
her so much, and there's a hole
right?
in my heart because of it. Ah.
And it's those kinds of words that'll keep you in a lower spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
whereas when you can say things like, oh, it was such a great time having with her, she was wonderful, she did all these wonderful things, she made great memories with us, and those are the I'm grateful for the time that I had with her. Those are the words that you'd like to use and change in your vocabulary if you're having a hard time with anything, even like if you're, I don't know, your car breaks down. It's a pretty common one. It makes a lot of people angry and upset and negative and just, unexpected, terrible. My car broke down once, flat tire. I didn't have a spare. I found out when I emptied my
Oh my
trunk.
gosh.
Oh yeah. And then I called for help, and my help was like, well, I'm not going to be there for like 3 hours. And I was like, okay. And I was stuck on the interstate, in the middle of the interstate, off on the side. And I went back to my car and took a nap. I mean, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, they were on their way, and then they showed up. We got my tire changed, and there we went. And it's
Mm-hmm.
most people freak out, and they would have been so upset at the situation. They would have been swearing and cussing and yelling, and
Mm-hmm.
then trying to, this is what I experience from a lot of people. They get upset with these things, little things like that, and
Oh, for sure.
and the way they talk to themselves is very
Because in that
uh
situation, you could have been like, oh, this is going to take forever. Now I'm not going to get to my
right.
destination. This is just
And
such
the
an
thing is,
inconvenience. And it's
you
just like,
know, I,
or it's like,
I
it's out of
wasn't
my
getting anywhere
control.
anyways. Yeah, I was out of my control.
Exactly.
I'm not getting anywhere anyways. What do I do? I was tired. I was leaving school at the time, and I was coming home, and I was living in 45 minutes from my home, and yeah, I broke down and I took a nap, and it was good. So I was kind of happy. So it
Yeah.
kind of worked out pretty well,
And
actually.
that's the thing too, is like when we allow positivity in those moments of distress or sadness, that's some of the best blessings that we can receive. I mean, in your instance, you acquired a nap, right? And that was
For
a
sure.
blessing. But that reminds me of a time where we had a tire break down and our different tire had broken down the night before, and this was the next day. So we had already used our spare and we had no reception. We were in the middle of Canada, and the last town we went to was like a 30-minute drive backwards. And so I just remember jacking it up the tire, taking it off, leaving my mom and my kids, and standing on the side of the road and hitchhike for the first time, which was kind of a bucket list item for me, so I'm not gonna lie. But in a safe capacity.
Beep.
Anyways, I know in a safe capacity. And so, but the semi that picked me up drove me to the next town, and it was like the perfect amount of timing to get there, and the guy was like, oh, we can't help you, but this guy right down the road can. And so then they drove me to this other person, and then the people there were some of the funniest, kindest, most genuine people I'd ever met. And then they drove me back and checked the tire pressure on all my other tires because we've been traveling for quite some time, and turns out the tire pressure was low on some other tires that they would have popped too had these people not come. So it was such a blessing that the one tire popped because it led to the perfect people to get help us out. But then also they recommended, hey, do you know just an hour down the road there's a hot springs? You guys seem stressed. Why don't you camp out at the hot springs and take a day off and just enjoy the day tomorrow? And we took them up on it, and it was one of the best memories my kids and I will ever have, you know?
And they used the most gracious and positive words towards you and made you feel good.
They
So
did. They
that's the
were
most
so
important
kind.
thing.
They were like, "Oh, honey, it happens. Not a big deal. What can we do for you?" And they were a hoot and a half on the drive on the drive back. And it was just so funny to me because I just look at those situations because my mom was just like, "How are you not mad?" I'm like, "What choice do I have?" I was like, "What
Yeah.
else could have possibly gone wrong?" I was like, "Let's keep going." But even saying that, even saying, "Oh, what else could possibly gone wrong?" invited that tire
Yeah,
popping into my life. So I was like,
it
maybe
sure
next time
did.
let's not say that. Maybe next
Yeah,
time we're just like, look at how great things are going so much in our direction. But, it all has purpose and all has meaning, and it has positive experiences if we want, because we could have been like, no, this set us back. Now we can't get to our trip on time. This trip was supposed to take X amount of times, but you just let go of that control and you enjoy life in the present moment,
and allow
and allow things to
it to
happen
work
exactly as they're supposed to.
as they're supposed to, because
Mm-hmm.
they unfold as they should. But if you add that resistance and the negativity, then it's going to just throw a damper and everything, and then you're really going to be in a mess. And
And I want to
that's the power of the words that we use, though, because that's what makes our reality, our thoughts, and everything around us. Sorry, I cut
exactly.
you off.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say, was just that law of attraction. I know that people uh can have can point their noses up at it a little bit sometimes when
Well,
they hear
they
that.
have mixed feelings about it because it's
When
something
they
they
don't
don't understand.
understand it. Exactly. I
You
know when
know,
I heard law of attraction at first, I was like, what? That's weird. Like, you can't just like attract things into your life that way. But then once I started realizing that,
and
as
looking
a
at the science that proves it.
exactly, as a chiropractor, I talk to people about like how families will have similar subluxations, right? And they will have similar, or for those who don't know what subluxations are, that's nerve impingement with misalignments. But and so subluxations, and it's because you're always touching each other, you're in the same environment, you're in the same, you have the same energy about you as a family, right? And so you can have the same, misalignments in each person's body, in each member of the family, and it's like, well, you guys all must be going through the same stress, because it shows up in everybody. And so when I started seeing that in patients and I started understanding it a little bit better, I was like, okay, so if their house is vibrating it this way and them touching each other, with hugs and stuff like that, as a kinetic chain reaction of energy, you know, then maybe this could be possible. And so just starting something like, how many times have we've been driving down the road and I'm like, oh, I want ice cream. And then all of a sudden there's an ice cream shop there that I never noticed before, that been there the whole time. And it's just like, oh my gosh, was that there this whole time? And now you noticed it because you brought it into your awareness, because you're attracting it. Or, like, oh, hey, I wish I had 20 bucks. And then you open up your purse and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that pocket was there and there was 20 bucks in it. That's right. I put that in there X, Y, and Z time ago. Like, you just start finding things in your life when, you get to that mindset where, what if it is possible? What if we could attract this positivity in our life? And the thoughts and the words that we have are just so important, because if you're being like, man, I'm gonna have a shit day today because I have this test I have to take, and after that I have to run across town to do this appointment, and da da da, and it's gonna be so stressful, you're gonna have a stressful day, you know?
Yeah.
But if you like, oh my gosh, I have the opportunity
And
to take this
also
test and do my
if you're
best.
even if you're even around people, like
Yes.
even if you're in positive and you're being positive and you're being word aware, if you're around people who are that way, you're going to absorb that. You're going to feel that. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, oh man. And you're going to notice it. Like I notice it all the time. I notice people's words now and they're just like, oh, I can't. I'm just, and I'm like, man, the excuses, come on. And I'll try to pep them up. I'll be like, hey, come on. You can't be saying it like that. You got to say it like this. And they'll be like, well, don't resist it, guy. Come on, be happy, and you get them in the change their state of mind a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and
You plant
it
those
helps.
seeds.
I do it
Yeah.
all the time. Like if I
Yeah.
hear people talking about it, I'll try to change their perspective on things because it's unhealthy to be in a negative space like that. And
Well, and that's a perfect segue, because, we were just talking about this too, about how negative words and positive words actually impact our brain differently, right? Like, so
our whole bodies,
and our whole
our whole body.
bodies, going back to, chiropractic, like we talk about subluxations, like things that cause interference in our body and not allowing our brain to talk to our nervous system the way it's supposed to. That is, that's a subluxation when it's done by a bone. And the things that cause subluxations are traumas, thoughts, toxins, and traumas, and threshold, right? And so, it used to be hard to describe to people like, okay, well, how can a thought create a negative response in your body that would make a bone misalign? And it's like, well, and you kind of, what happens if you have a loss and you're stressed about that loss, or, going back to the dog example, and now you have a high cortisol response. Now you're slouching. Now you're, looking down more. Like, all those things will impact you physiologically. But even the negative, you and I did some research on this. The negative words will impact your amygdala, and the amygdala is where you process like threats and fears. It's your fear and pleasure center of the brain. And when it has like a fear response that's triggered in the amygdala, it'll make the hypothalamus create more cortisol, more adrenaline, just by using negative words. And when you have those negative words that are now creating a cortisol or an adrenaline response in your body, the cortisol will mess up your hormones, and it'll keep you in a state of fight or flight, and it'll keep you stressed, and it'll make your body ache in ways that it's not supposed to, and or it is trying to tell you something. And then you have increased inflammation. And when your body's stressed, it doesn't allow as proper oxygen flow because you're usually not breathing properly. So now you have decreased oxygen in the body, and that creates higher acid load in the body. The higher acid load due to the decreased oxygen will promote more inflammation. And then now you have inflammatory disease. Now you have, not proper oxygen. Now you have aches and pains and stress and all this kind of stuff just from using negative words. Like a lot of people who start transitioning, when I work with my patients, I always try to keep positive, try to keep encouraging them, try to, tell them they're doing a great job, because they are doing a great job. I'm not lying to them. They're showing up, they're committing to their care. They're doing the best they can with their situation to have health filled results, and they are doing an amazing job. And when they get that encouragement, it changes their mindset. They have a better adjustment, they hold it longer, all this kind of stuff, and it's just better for them.
They stand taller, they
They
look
stand
brighter, their
taller, they look
eyes are
taller,
wider,
and that's
their
exactly it.
sense of
Because
wonder.
when you're more positive, your shoulders are back. That allows for better lung expansion. You stand taller, your head straighter, you're not looking down. All of that impacts your body
And it
so
all
very much.
starts with words,
I mean,
the way you talk to yourself.
even just looking down will create like 8 to 10 pounds of pressure per degree looking forward with your neck, right? And so if you're looking down and like, oh, I'm so sad, like you're putting a lot of pressure on your spine, and your spine is your communication center to your brain. And your brain, if it doesn't have that proper communication, is going to have to work harder to try to communicate. And then now you're using all that extra energy in your brain trying to communicate with the rest of your body, then now you have fatigue. Right? Like it's this whole cycle, but you use
Yeah.
positive words. Positive words will actually help. It'll promote better function in the frontal lobe, which is like impulse control, which is emotions, which is like habits, muscle memories, all that kind of stuff, or muscles and movements, and and just it has a positive effect in the frontal lobe.
Self-control.
Exactly, self-control. And so when you use positive words, you're going to have a better time creating good habits. You're going to have a better time creating like a health filled result in your life, and working towards those goals, where the law of attraction is a little bit easier because you're not sitting in that negative energy. And we've talked about this before, where negativity and and lower level thinking, I guess, for lack of a better term, will create your atoms in your body to physically vibrate at a slower rate, right? And so you
Right.
feel heavier when you talk, happier when you talk positive, and that neutrality plus, that neutrality and that peace state of mind, then you're going to physically be vibrating at a lighter frequency, but
Right.
if how many people have a problem either with themselves or with somebody else, and they sit there and they're like, oh, it's the same thing with the same person and the same problem all the time, and they never listen, and they never listen, and they never listen, and they never listen. Okay, well, first off, you're putting that out there that they're never going to listen, right? Secondly, you're putting that on them that they're never going to listen. So they're absorbing that too. And, whether it's like an employee or your kid or, a friend or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But like, it's just, for an example. And then because you're stuck in that cycle where you're just like, oh, it's always the same. It's always the same. I'm always frustrated,
It's
you
being
know,
reactive.
it's being reactive. And so when you change that wording, where it's just like, well, I noticed that what I'm doing isn't working. So what if I just, it's out of my control, I use positive language, I plant the seeds, I stop fussing over it, let's see what happens, you know?
Yeah,
And most often
100%.
you get better results.
Right, because they're feeding off of your new words. They're like, wait a minute. He'd be like, well, screw you, Jim. Today he was like, hi, Jim. How are you? Are you feeling great? Thanks. All right, thank you for everything. See,
Mm-hmm.
that makes a huge difference on people's psyche. Because then he's blown away like,
What just
wait a
happened?
minute. What
Right.
just wait a
Or
minute. Usually you're a dick, you know?
exactly. One I had shared with you this example of, when we were in student
I love
clinic,
words.
people would always be like, oh, poor, I don't remember what his name was. So poor so and so, his patients always cancel on him. He's going to have a hard time getting his numbers. to graduate, and every time a patient would cancel, like, oh, we knew it, or we'd see a patient come up under his name and be like, oh, bet they're gonna cancel, and then within 5 minutes they'd cancel. And I was like, this poor person was like up a creek without a paddle, because everybody in our group was, and we had one person being like, you guys stop saying that, the reason his patients keep canceling is because you guys keep saying it, and when we stopped saying it, we're like, come on, you got it this time, they're not going to cancel. Then he would get like, then they bring in their kid and he get an extra adjustment. We're like, what the heck is this? And it's just crazy to me because it was just a colleague, you know but other
Right.
people would just be like, oh, this always happens, this never happens, or and it's just, and the universe, God doesn't like those definitive words of always and never. He's always listening, he always puts it to the test. So if you're like, oh, I never do that, it's like, really, never? Well, let's create an opportunity to see if that's true. you
And
know
yeah, absolutely. And then I like well, like you said, throwing it out in the universe. One thing that I like about science is they prove that when they hook you up to their machines, they can prove that your thoughts are actually sending those vibrations out into the universe. So for me, like when the law of attraction is here in you, um, and it doesn't matter. Like the universe doesn't know the difference between positive and negative, right? It just knows what you're asking. It's saying, okay,
it
so
knows
this
the
is where,
vibration and the frequency of what it is that
right.
you're
And
communicating.
even if it's a low vibration, it's going to give you that in
It's
return,
going to
right?
match it.
It's going to match it and then it's going to send it back. So that's where like, yes, you want to use positives and negatives, but you also got to use the right positive and
Got
negatives.
to be intentional about.
Intentional,
Mm-hmm.
gotta feel it, and you gotta and feel the good and feel the affirmation that you're speaking into it. Use the language of the universe's affirmations, um, and even if they're negative or positive, you're going to get that in return, right? Yeah, like we just said. I don't know where I was going with that. I had something, but I had a brain fart moment. So
It's okay.
yeah.
But it's true though. I mean, going back to the ice cream, where it's like, oh, I really want ice cream, and that you're at the grocery store and you find yourself accidentally walking down the ice cream aisle, and you're like, oh my gosh, well, since I'm here, I might as well, or that, like, hey, I really would love it if this worked out in my schedule just perfectly, but there's no way in heck that that's going to happen. But wouldn't that be nice? And then everything falls in place and your schedule works out exactly like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, and we feel so blessed, right? Because those are blessings. But they're also, we were open to receiving those blessings because we asked for them, right? I mean, there's an abundance of love and resources out there for us, but we don't ever. I know so many people who just don't feel like they can ask for it. People who struggle with help, asking for help or whatever, that even within themselves, in the privacy of their own home, being like, oh my gosh, like, I couldn't ask for
Well,
that to,
that's
like, work out the way that I wanted to. Who am I to have that work out for me? And it's like,
well,
well,
that's
you're
the
everything.
programming. That's the programming you got to get rid of, though. Like
Right. And that's
that's
what I
like
mean.
society, and you got to realize that you're more powerful than that, right? You got to be
Hmm.
like, I am this powerful being. You know, I was listening to Dr. Joe Dispenza,
Who's a chiropractor as well.
who's also a chiropractor, and he works with all these neurosurgeons, all these neurologists, and all these
Right.
scientists, and they discovered that that and there's other people that discovered this too. This is not new information, but the human has enough power in them electrically to charge entire cities, right? This is not new information. This is
Hmm.
age-old information. But I was just listening to Joe Dispenza just the other day, and it was brought up. That's why it was so relevant for the moment. But
It was
just think
almost like
about
it was
that. It was
attracted into this exact moment.
yeah, exactly. But think about that. Like you have enough power electrically inside of you
Hmm.
to charge an entire city. But we don't utilize that properly, right? We're always scattered with our thoughts. We're always doing these different things with our words. We're always worrying about what other people are thinking and how their words are affecting us because their words affect
Mm-hmm.
us as well, right? If somebody comes up to you and they're like, well, you're a big fat jerk, or you're this, that, or the other thing. some people take that personally, and it really hurts them, and it makes them feel worthless because of the words, right? And those words, that's another way of the words are so impactful and powerful. I used to get like that. People used to bully me, and then I started realizing like early on, and I was like, well, really, your words are just words. They don't impact me at all if I don't let them, right? So that's why I was always a goofy little kid. And even though I was a loner kid
Well,
almost,
that's how you learn how to deflect their words.
right, you deflect their words and you go about your business all happy and, playing with your sticks and catching frogs and stuff and having a good time. But it's just interesting, like I see the way I see things now versus just being there in the past and all that. It's so much different like when you're self-aware and you're analyzing words and you're hearing
You have the
these
self-awareness
phrases
about
and
it.
the self-awareness about it. It's pretty cool actually. It is like a superpower, and it's you can really change your
You could
entire
change
life
your
with
outcome.
it.
I mean, yeah, the last year of my life has changed so drastically, and I would say even more so the last 3 months, and even more so the last month, just choosing to remove myself from situations that were negative, and there was that constant negative energy. And I caught myself, that was one of the hardest things, was I kept finding myself in situations that were familiar, where they were very heavy, very negative, very um feeding into what was familiar to me, was not a positive or a health filled situation. And so I moved from one situation to the next situation to the next situation, and I was like, oh my gosh, why do I keep finding myself in these situations no matter where I go or how I am about the situation? And I think it was you that pointed out to me. You're like, well, Carly, it's because you're manifesting that. Like you keep choosing these situations or these scenarios into your life. And I was like, huh. And then when I started trying to transition my mindset into it, it was like this being ripped, like ripped apart, or trying to break through, in the cartoons, where the cartoon characters trying to like break through a wall, and it's rubber, and it's like they're like pushing
Yeah,
through it until they finally break
it is what
through.
it's like.
It's kind of what it feels like. And that
It
was
is.
definitely it. It was because I had this, I remember the last big transition for me, where it was such a big choice. I was like, okay, I'm clearly trying to have a better neutral and peaceful mindset. But because of external factors that are out of my control, that are super negative, this is not like, it's invading my peace. It's invading my peace. It's invading my neutrality. How can I change? Is it something that I can change and be so powerful at internally that it doesn't affect me? Or do I have to transition out of the situation? And for me, it was having to transition out of the situation because I didn't have a strong enough muscle built at the time, where my inner peace was so disruptive, or like so undisrupted, that I could withstand any negativity around me. Because there's a threshold. There's definitely a threshold. But one of the things that I like working on with clients, which was something that I was taking my own advice on, was when negative things are happening from other people, you kind of have to look at it like you're holding up a mirror, with the mirror facing them. And I would tell them, like, okay, if somebody's projecting their negativity at you, right? Because they might be saying words that they're like, you, but really, a lot of times when we talk to people, especially in negative ways, it's things that are frustrated about ourselves, that we haven't changed, or are unwilling to change, or just don't have the tools to change, or in transition of changing, and are working at it, right? And I would tell my clients, is like, just pretend like you're holding up a mirror, with a mirror facing the other person, and any hurtful words are really things that they're just saying about their own life, right? And on the back of that mirror, you write a little message to yourself, where it's just like, you are beautiful, amazing, capable, functioning individual filled with peace and joy, and the person in front of you is just experiencing pain in their life, and that pain does not have to affect you. And when I started doing that, I with clients, like when I would advise clients into I make the suggestion for them, and they were like, oh my gosh, that does work. And then I was like, huh, no kidding. So then I started doing it in my life, and I was like, huh, No kidding, But at some point, then I started turning that mirror around. And so when I would get frustrated with somebody else and I would hear myself being like, I can't believe this situation. I can't believe they acted this way, whatever, whatever, whatever. I started turning that mirror around and I started reading what I was saying to myself. Okay, well, what about the situation that they did that was so irritating to you? Okay, well, it was because you're actually not happy with that with yourself, right? And then when I would sit in that and journal about it, or sometimes I would just like, you know what? I can't even think about it. I'm not even gonna get any energy. I'll think about it tomorrow. And so then the next day I would listen to my thoughts about the day before and I'm like, oh, I'm the dick. Okay, I see it.
Yeah,
That's actually something I need to work on in me. And the only reason I was upset because they were
take
trying to hold me
accountability.
accountable and I didn't like it. So I
Yeah,
snapped a little bit. Okay, I see how that is.
a lot of
And
people don't
what
want to be held accountable for
Right.
themselves.
And that accountability, I mean, even recently that happened in a situation and the next day I thought about it and I was like, you know what? That person was just loving me and I really overreacted because the level of accountability I didn't like. And once I humbled myself, checked myself and corrected the situation, thankfully I didn't like tell anybody other than myself about it. So I didn't have anybody to apologize to. I was like, however, I was like, okay, okay, okay. I see that this person was just trying to love me and I just didn't know how to handle it because they were trying to hold me to a higher standard than I was wanting to hold myself or hold me accountable of taking action in a space where I wasn't ready to take action in. And and that's the beauty of it is that we don't have to worry about other people. We don't have to worry about how they like if for example if this person in my life who was trying to hold me accountable would have sat there and been like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried that Carly's not going to take my advice or not going to do this or not going to do that, like how much energy she would have wasted when I got there in the end all on my own, right? And
Right.
I know that that person was praying for me, so it was like, putting positive vibes out in my direction to help me with the situation, so that was helpful. However, we have to be mindful and aware that what we say to others, a lot of times the stuff that we have to work on ourselves. And if that's the case, say, hey, I realize I wasn't trying, I was avoiding accountability there. I'm actually capable of this. I'm actually going to take action on this. I'm actually going to love myself through this. I am actually capable of doing this. And then all the anxiety goes away around those tasks that we build up in our head that are so much bigger and they're really not.
No, they never are.
So
I've
choosing your
always
words.
found,
Oh, go ahead.
I've, I was just gonna say, I always found every difficult situation that I thought was difficult never turned out to be difficult in the end. Like you get past it and you're like, holy crap, that was a lot easier than I thought it was gonna be. And maybe it's just the time that passed and you were just like happy and proud to have overcome the situation. But it always seems harder at the time. And then when you look back, it's nothing. And that's what I like going into every situation thinking, well, that's nothing. I'm gonna get through it no matter what, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
my positive. That's I'm coming for you. I'm coming through you, and I'm gonna make it. You know, those are the
Yeah,
words I like to use when I'm going through situations. And even if it's just silent, you don't have to say it out
that's
loud if you don't
exactly
want
it.
to.
I
You could
almost feel
stay
like it's
silent.
more powerful when you say it quietly in your head.
That's because when you say it, the vibrations vibrate your entire cells, right? Your cells
Mhm.
go, the water in your cells go, everything resonates, and that's when you're just like, yeah, that's that power
I think we
goosebump
talked about that in
moments.
the first episode too, with the thoughts, you know, are
I
it
love
starts
them
with everything
feelings.
starts with a thought. And if you take a deep breath and you take that positive thought and you breathe it into your body, now your whole body is emitting that positive thought.
Right.
It's the same thing. And
It's
so yeah,
powerful words.
choosing your
Powerful
words
words.
wisely is such a art. I'm gonna go with that word.
It
It's
is
such
an
an
art.
art. And for some people it looks a certain way, and other people's is gonna look totally different. And that's okay because you don't have to worry about other people. You only have to worry about what that art looks like to yourselves. I mean, for
Exactly.
example, I swear a lot, right? And I try to check myself
And they're
in
negative.
certain company, but I remember one time my mom was just like, I heard somewhere that people who swear a lot really just have a lot of pent up pain and anger and hurt that they haven't managed. And so they swear to cope with it. And I said, well, F you, mom. No, I didn't say that to my mother. I might have. I don't know. She laughed at it. She's got a good sense of humor about me. But it ever since she said that, I was like, it sat with me because now every time I swear, I was like, is that just a little bit of pain leaving my body that I'm still choosing to keep around? And I'm like, nah, that can't be it. But I'm still in denial. So it's a transition. And
It's a
that is
learning process.
it's my artful thing. And then it was funny because I was listening to somebody recently who was like, yeah, who's up and coming podcaster, and even he said that he was like, yeah, I used to swear a lot, but then I realized it didn't really have purpose, and so now I only swear when it really like makes an impact to drive a point home. I know Tony Robbins says
Sure,
that he uses the F word and he swears a lot because it shocks people. It's like,
it
oh, like it
does.
gets their attention because like, oh, this person's saying something, and you pay more attention. And he doesn't use it like every third word. He uses it very intentionally as he's talking when he feels like he's losing, maybe not losing the audience because he's a very engaging individual, but
Yeah, he is.
when he's communicating, he says he uses it with such intention, and it's not to be crude, it's not to be crass. He uses it with purpose. And so I was like, okay. So if I'm going to swear, then it should have purpose in it. Okay, I hear you. And so, but that's an artful practice that I'm transitioning in and out of and learning my ebb and flow with it. And not that our listeners all have to start swearing like a trucker, but um
But
but
you do have to learn the art.
but you do, it's an art, how you talk to yourself, how you choose to talk to yourself, how you choose to find your humor in life, how you're going to motivate yourself. With Joshua, for you, humor is everything in your life. And so I mean, maybe not everything, but
I
it's a
mean,
mate. It's
I'm
a
pretty.
it's
I use sarcasm and goofy comments and goofy things just
Yeah,
to,
it's a
like,
very default
changes.
response for you, right?
Right.
And that's your art because that's what brings you joy. That's what makes you smile. I remember when we were in training for marketing, they would tell us, like, hey, if you're going to call a client or somebody, smile. Even if you don't feel happy, smile, because the other person will hear that on the phone, and it'll change your rhythm and your, tone and everything. And then they'll feel more welcomed, even though they're not even looking at you. And so doing that with your words, with yourself, if you're not feeling it, like there'll be times where I'll just smile and say something sarcastic, or I'll try to say something angry while I'm
Come
smiling,
on.
and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it makes it makes such an impact when we just start accepting these small things and giving ourselves permission to change these small, tiny little habits. Like if you wake up every day cursing the day, maybe, and then you do it all day, every day, maybe you don't curse it in the morning, and you give yourself permission to curse it through the rest of the day. And then you notice, okay, well, I'm not going to feel bad about the morning. And now that transition into lunchtime and afternoon and everything. And before you know it, you might actually enjoy a majority of your day, you know,
Especially if you smile.
especially if you're smiling. And
I smile a lot.
I think too, I kind of want to put this point in here as well. Is that when I was in a lower negative energy, and when I was very much in that things just keep happening to me, I have no luck, I like a victim mentality, right? For the lack of a better word. When I was in a victim mentality or holding on to a lot of past traumas that maybe I wasn't constantly keeping at the surface, but they were still such a heavy part of me. I noticed that I was creating difficult situation after difficult situation after difficult situation, because then it wasn't really things were happening to me. It was, hey, because I'm still struggling with this core wound around, whatever that's keeps manifesting in my life in all these different ways. And when I started letting go of past traumas, when I started letting go of all these things that were such heavy vibrational things in my life, then I noticed I was having better quote luck. I was having more opportunities. Things were working out for me a little bit better. Things started easing up. Things started changing. And I felt like I had more energy and stuff like that. So it was interesting to me too, because even on a subconscious level, not having worked through stuff, or, pushing stuff down and repressing things, or, being in denial of how situations, your accountability in a situation is, that still sits in you. And and once you release it and you let it go, whether it's surfacing it, accepting your part in it and letting it go, or just saying, hey, I'm not going to let this phase me anymore, or doing the work to overcome those wounds that have been created to you from past traumas. You know, once you do that, your life will be better, and it will be better, and it will continue to improve. And and I can't say that like an expert or anything like that, but just from my experience, it's been very much a truth in my life.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's been a truth in anyone who tries his life. Like I've my life is from where I was to where I am now, huge, huge. Like one that's why I believe so strongly in all of it. The science, the the laws that govern the universe, the universal I like even string theory and all that. And um we can get into that later on down the road and in different conversations. But
Yeah, those
um,
universal laws. I think we could do a whole episode on just touching base on
oh
the
yeah,
laws of
there's
the
so many.
universe.
I mean,
And
and it's what
and
governs everything, you
yeah, and
know.
not to be like, hippy dippy, because again, people, when I first started hearing things about like universal laws and stuff like that, I was like, oh, that's
I
not really,
started
you
looking
can't
for,
believe in that. And it's like, well, it's a
well,
good thing. And with chiropractic, it was the same
yeah,
way. People would
that's
tell
a lot of people would be like that.
chiropractors, so they're like, oh, well, I don't believe in chiropractic. And we were trained in school to have the response in certain seminars that I was a part of. It's like, oh, well, good thing that you don't have to believe in it, because it'll work whether you believe in it or not. It's like,
For
oh,
real.
okay. And it's the same thing. And
It's the same thing with the laws.
once you gain that understanding, once you accept that, like, okay, there are things outside of my control that God put in our life that are here to serve us and influence and impact us. And it's not me trying to create a certain type of reality. It's just me accepting the tools that are out there and utilizing
Yeah,
them.
for
And if
sure.
that brings abundance into my life, then who am I to say no to it?
For real. Yeah, when I first
So,
started learning about it, I kind of went more towards the science side. I was like,
mhm,
well, where's the science to back it up? Because that's the way I used to
yep,
think was like, what's the science behind it? What's the proof, the facts, did they do hypotheses and did they do this? And that's what led me
mhm.
down
The
the
evidence, like, where's the evidence?
right, and that's what led me into like the quantum world and the physics world. And I started getting into all that.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that's
That's another
cans of
podcast for
wor
another
cans
day.
of worms for later, but
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
fun stuff.
But I mean, it's just those seed planting, and it's not something that was instantaneous. The first time I had a friend introduce me to any of the ideas of even just changing your words and your positivity and your thoughts was probably 6, 7 years ago, where, I had a friend who was just like, "Hey, I'm actually choosing to." I remember her stopping me because we used to communicate in a very similar way. And so then I was communicating with her in a way that we typically always did. And then she just looked at me and she's like, I'm actually choosing not to complain about stuff anymore. So that I'm stopping that. And I was like, oh, and that seed was planted 7 years ago. And then seeds were planted and, nurtured along the way. And now it's coming to a point where it's like I've really spent the last year being very intentional about putting in the work to make it happen. And it's you get out of it what you put into it. And so if you're going
Right,
to
like
half
Earl
ass it,
Nightingale always
you're going to get a
says.
half ass results. But if you're like, nope, I'm changing this, I'm committing to it, I'm going to understand it, I'm going to go through the discomforts along the way while this transitions, and realizes it's going to be a lot of shedding and a lot of molting along the way to get to that higher vibrational and better version of self, then it's worth it. And so um a piece of advice that I would like to leave with listeners for today is it's okay to have it be uncomfortable the first couple of times you do it, or while you're getting used to talking to yourself in a positive way and talking about situations and how things are and navigating them in a more neutral and peace-filled way. It's going to be uncomfortable, but if you just sit in that discomfort in those initial processes, then you're going to gain confidence, because we never have confidence before we do a thing. It's always after we've come out on the other side, right? And so gaining confidence in that habit of having a neutral and peace-filled communication style in how you choose your words is going to be so, so key And over time, that discomfort will get less and less. So
Yeah,
just
for sure.
keep building up the habit because it is worth it. And over time, you will see the gains.
Yeah. I would also say write down write down a
Mm,
lot of positive words that you want to use throughout the day. I would say like, all right, here's a list of 10 words that I'm going to change and use in my day-to-day life. And they could be anything, like the word
replacement words.
happy,
Yeah, you do. You have to
placement
have those
words,
transition words.
joy, hey, just just hello,
Even just the word good. Oh, I'm good. Oh, okay.
good.
Well, what about you
Yes,
being good? Oh, I'm
sure.
excellent today. I'm, peppy
I
today.
The best one I like is I am. I am this. I am that. I am going to do this. I am going to do that. I love the I
Hmm.
am. The I am is very powerful in the universal space. So because that's a very powerful affirmation. I am this. I am this millionaire. I am this healthy being. I am this super strong being. I am this
And if you
powerful.
close your eyes and envision it too, I think you sent me something and it's like if you close your eyes and envision it and then you say it in your head, your body is having the sensation like the experience is actually happening. And when your
Right.
body
The
is familiar with that
visualization.
experience, then it's going to be more likely to happen in your life in a shorter and quicker time frame.
And also, if you're really interested, like I am, like learn the science behind what happens when you do these things. Like close your eyes, say the words, the chemicals release, it mixes with the serums and the crystallizations in your brain and all the
Hmm.
things, and it sends the electricity through the spine and connects through the whole body and receives through the spine again and back up to the brain and learn about that stuff because it's really cool. It's fun to learn.
Sounds like a
I'm still
podcast for another
learning.
day.
Yeah, another podcast for another day. It's interesting
Josh
and
has
it
got
helps.
ideas.
It helps bring helps bring comfortability to yourself and understanding of what and who you really are as a human being. So that's
Well, and it comes back to that self-awareness, right?
right.
And what you
Self-awareness,
want for
exactly.
yourself and being courageous enough to ask yourself, what is it? If I could imagine anything to happen, what would I imagine to happen? And having that be a positive thing or a
Yeah.
neutral thing,
Could
that
be
neutral and
anything.
peace.
You could be like, I want to learn to fly, and next thing you know, you're building a helicopter.
You never know. It's true. Or you run into somebody who invites you on their airplane and you're like, what how'd that happen? You know?
Exactly. Like,
So, but yeah, but no, this was good, and I think it's just such a useful tool to get people to have that self-awareness of and to start utilizing in their life. So, challenging you listeners, like Josh said, like write some stuff down, write some transition words down, and encourage yourself, every day to maybe pick a different word that you're going to start transitioning. I notice I say, the F bomb a lot. So I'm going to start saying flowers instead and see how ridiculous and happy and fluffy I feel about
son of a
that.
flowers. Ah,
But you know what,
stub
though?
my toe.
That makes me laugh just thinking about it. So,
Horrible Lily just taking my.
but I'm humble enough to admit it. We're all in a state of transition. So, but yeah, so looking forward to next week's episode. I think we're gonna take some of Josh's ideas and get some of those going because you came up with you referenced a lot of really good points that I think we could really expand on to help benefit listeners.
It'll
So
make me a little more comfortable too, because I like the subject.
the subject matter, yeah, it definitely helps when you like the subject matter. So,
I mean, I
but
like also all these subjects, and words are very definitely important and very powerful. I just, I like, I don't know, I
But
like
you know what?
science
I
and
mean, one of the things that you've even wanted is to figure out how to have more confidence in public speaking. And then we started a podcast. So, you attracted this into your life and, the fact that both of us show up and continue to work on these skills that are helping us develop the futures that we want, this has purpose too.
I'm
And
trying.
if the listeners happen to get something out of it, that's fantastic. you know um
If not, I get over my fear and the world keeps moving and I go on to bigger and better things.
exactly. Well, we're getting there either way. So
We're getting there.
yes. So and so are our listeners. Our listeners are moving on to bigger and better things too because they made the commitment to listen to this episode to the end. So we will respect their time and say goodbye, and we will definitely catch you next week on our new episode, episode 7, coming up
Practice your
soon.
words.
Practice your words.